Welcome to Booktopia TV. I'm John Purcell, and I'm here with Fleur McDonald, the voice of the Outback, to talk about her new book, Crimson Dawn. Welcome, Fleur.
Thanks, John.
Well, it's great to finally meet you because we've actually been Twitter buddies for years.
We have been.
I think it's 2010 when we first sort of started communicating via Twitter.
But I was still learning the ropes and got everything wrong on Twitter.
Well, it was a wonderful time on Twitter because everyone was learning the ropes, and there was a lot of communication between authors and people getting to know each other and people helping each other.
Yeah.
And I think that's that period was one of the best periods on Twitter for authors. And I think that a lot of relationships that are still going on Twitter were formed
From back then, yeah. Absolutely. There was no way I would have come across a lot of the authors that I did if I hadn't made myself go and work out how to use Twitter, because I'm a tech savvy, I'm hopeless. So yeah, to be able to do that was really, really good.
Right from the beginning, there was kind of a community being built amongst women who were writing stories set in rural Australia. I got a sense at the beginning that there wasn't as much competition as the publishers would have liked, and more community and support base that sort of developed between a whole lot of very well-known writers.
Well, we're country girls and we've been brought up like that. That's the way our communities work. So to support and help each other, that's just probably what's inbuilt in us. It's probably a little bit more competitive now. There's a few more of us, but deep down that's where we're all from, is the country, and that's the way we work.
My first experience of rural romance, rural lit, was Rachel Treasure, Jillarooing. And it sort of landed on the Australian market, and people were like, what is this?
It just went bang.
Yeah. And it did take a long time between that and the next wave of writers to come through. Were you at all inspired by Rachel Treasure's story?
Yeah, absolutely. She's probably the only reason I started to write. Although, I've always written, but I didn't know what type. I never actually saw myself as ever wanting to be an author. That wasn't something that I'd really ever thought about. But I read this book and I thought, I love that. That's writing about what I know and what inspires me. So, and I hate saying I just sat down and wrote Red Dust, because it's really disrespectful to the people that work very hard at their craft and study writing. I haven't. So when I realised that that there was a hunger for that sort of genre, I thought, well, I'm probably fairly well placed to have a go. So I did, and that's what happened.
Well placed is an understatement. I mean, you live that life. That's something that I really want people to get an understanding of, is that you live in Esperance, WA, and on a farm, and you do this all day, every day, and writing as a side, on something that you do on the side. Can you tell me a bit about what your daily life is like?
Okay, well, depending on what time of the year, but say we're doing lamb marking, well, we usually go on from the house by about 5, and we mark lambs, until the mob's finished, and then we go off and do something else afterwards. And it's pretty long days, especially during the really busy time, shearing and crutching and seeding and that. But it's fun. We get to see the sunrise every morning. It's brilliant. I wouldn't want to be anywhere else.
And so, how do you manage time? If you've got a deadline for, I assume, with your publisher, saying you've got to have a book by such and such.
I ring up and say, "Excuse me, can I please have a new deadline?" No, I write when I can. I have learnt not to put pressure on myself. If I don't write every day, I just don't write every day. There can be times that I might go for 3 months and I don't write. I do write if I'm out on the farm and we're shifting sheep and I don't need to concentrate too much and we're going down the laneway, I will write longhand. I now have a daughter that can type up my notes, which is fantastic. So I just write when I can. My previous editor, Siobhan, wrote in Red Dust that I snatch time for my writing. That's exactly what I do. And I know now if I can't put pressure on myself, because really the farm and the family need to come first, and I'll fit the writing in. I've always made my deadlines. We've been very close, but I have always made them.
So I mean, with all the pressure to keep the farm, which is a business, going, was there any tension at all in that first period? Because a lot of writers do find it very hard to business family and writing time. And writing time seems to be the one that gets shunted down the end. But it's very important to a writer.
Yeah.
It's something which makes them feel happy and contented, and it's their creative reason for living. How
My
do you do it?
fingers actually get really itchy, and I know that sounds utterly ridiculous, but if I've got something in my head I need to get out, I actually do need to get it out, because my fingers just go crazy. So when you say tension between my husband and I, is that what you mean?
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
in all relationships with writers.
Yeah, well, yes. Basically, that's a short answer to it. It took some time for Anthony to, and I still wouldn't say he likes it now, but he accepts it now. I think really what happened is that when Red Dust came out, I still was 100% totally on the farm. And same with Blue Skies. When Purple Roads came out, by that stage my mother-in-law had been diagnosed with leukemia, and she'd got quite sick, and I was looking after her. So for the last 3-4 years, I've been caring for her, and I've been at her beck and call. So I was really unreliable to help on the farm. So I still went out and worked as I was needed, but I was a lot more unreliable, because if Mrs. Matt called, I had to go. And I think that's probably the reason why that transition across with my writing has worked, because I gradually got taken off the farm for family circumstances. Now Mrs. Matt died in August, so now I'm back there, and I'm completely immersed in that again.
So the stories that you write, they come from these family dramas. They come from the real life experiences you encounter.
Look, the settings all are what I know and what I experience. Absolutely. The storyline has to be a little bit different, because I can't be writing about people that I know, because someone will sue me and I'll get in trouble. So I am an avid radio listener. And something, little stories, little crazy, bizarre stories will just pique my interest, and I start asking questions. Well, okay, that's a really cool story. So what if that happened to that person? What if? And then I answer all the questions, and then I put a storyline. So the setting is definitely based on, and anything to do with the farming is based on what I know. And I'm probably pretty lucky, because I grew up in a little country town. My nana and papa did have quite a large sheep station, and my auntie and uncle have got a large cattle station out of Esperance, and I spent a lot of time in station country as a kid, and now we're in intensive farming in Esperance, so I've got a fairly broad overall picture of rural life.
Now I'd like to hear a bit about Crimson Dawn. Can you tell me a bit about the storyline for this one?
Yeah, so Laura Murphy is, I think she's in her late 20s, and she's got a battle. She gets handed a farm. She's quite passionate about farming, and her grandfather can't run it anymore, so she's handed a farm, and she's got to battle sort of family dramas and skeletons in the closet that go back to a time in the 30s and 40s, which is another thread that runs through the book, and she realises that. Gets to a point in the book that she actually realises she isn't going to be able to move on and save the farm unless she works out what happened back in the 30s and 40s. So, and in between all of this, she starts up a jillaroo school, because she started farming around the same time as what I did, and that's the late 90s, and it was still a very male-dominated time then. So she wanted to impart knowledge on girls in a safe environment. So that's what she does.
Yeah, talking about the male environment. Anyone looking at the boom in rural romance was to think there aren't any properties left owned by men.
Yeah. Yep.
They're all being bequeathed by women. Going on to that, because we as booksellers, we love to place people. We like to label people, so we can then put a collection together and sell it to the readers, and also to give surety to the readers, some sort of sense I'm going to get what I paid for here. Now, rural romance, rural lit, the one that got stolen from Chook Lit was stolen, because that usually used to refer to older women's fiction, so it's like chick lit, but then chook lit. So then rural people stole that one, and then there was a nasty one that went around the hick lit, which was another one.
There's been some terrible ones.
But I understand our need, as a marketer, I need to have a label to flog this stuff. How do you like to think of it? Because I think of you as hanging on the edge of this movement. You've never really been right in the centre of the romance side of things.
No.
It's been more about real life situations and drama.
Yeah. So there's all those little so you've got rural lit, and then there's all those little subgenres in there. And I understand now, which I probably didn't when I first started, the absolute necessity to label people to do what you're saying. I know when Purple Roads came out, I was classed as a bit of a crossover genre from like the rural with crime, and probably a bit the same with Red Dust. I don't probably really know where I fit, but I would like to think that it's in a storytelling genre, it's all storytelling, that's not quite right.
More of a saga?
Not even a saga. I tell it how it is. I don't write anything any glossier than what it actually is in real life. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So you're not going to... everyone loves a happy ending. There's got to be a happy ending. I get that. Romance isn't actually my first love as a reader, so it's not going to be my first love as a writer. Crime is where I like to be, but I also love family mysteries and I love Australian history, so when you pick my books up you'll probably get all of that.
So tell me about your reading, because it's very interesting to anyone who reads someone, who reads an author, to find out where their imagination is most excited, where they're getting all their ideas, or where their love of reading comes from.
Well, my love of reading comes from my Nana Parnell. She absolutely instilled in that. She was one of these really cool grandmas that used to sit us down in front of fires and tell us stories, and we had to use our imagination. So, and she loved writing too, so that's where my love of reading comes from. Michael Connelly is the god of my world when it comes to books. Michael Connelly, John Grisham, Kathy Reichs. Loved Patricia Cornwell's early stuff, not so much her later stuff. Nick Alexander, I really enjoy her books, as Rachel Treasure. Kimberly Freeman is another one who has made a huge hit in Australia and across the world recently, who I absolutely adore. Her book Wildflower Hill, I think, is probably the best book I've read in quite some time. And Belinda Alexandra, I really like her as well.
The going back, what sort of research did you have to do to go back into the 30s and 40s for this one?
Well, probably not that much, just because my next door neighbour back home in South Australia was a shearer in the 30s and 40s, so I just picked up the phone and rang Bob.
Perfect.
Yeah, so that was good. And he told me things. When you've got those eyewitness accounts, you are going to write authentically because you're getting told the real thing. So there's a little section in the book that talks about the shearers bike riding in between sheds, and they're going to get punctures. A lot of the time they used to fill their tubes with grass and mud, so they weren't riding on the rims. Now, I wouldn't have known that unless I'd talked to Bob.
Yeah.
So those sorts, I suppose it is research, but it's actually also saying good day to your neighbour.
Being part of the land, I read an article in the paper the other day written by you as a sort of a cry to the city folk to think and to try and get the government to support drought-affected areas.
Yeah.
You're passionate about this subject. Can you tell me a bit about why you chose to go ahead and do that?
Well, I watched Landline, I can't remember the date it was, but I watched Landline and I was horrified that there had been this farmer who had gone and he'd wanted to send his cattle to market and they were too light, they couldn't go. The truckie had got there and said, look, can't take them, animal welfare rules, so that's fine. So this bloke had to shoot all of his cattle, I think it was 200 or 400, I can't remember. And then he turned the gun on himself, and I just couldn't stop crying. I hate those sort of stories, and it's not been that long ago that Esperance had a pretty foul drought, and I remember it very clearly. And growing up in the mid-north of South Australia, there was lots of droughts. So I didn't even think of it. I'm cross with the government that they won't put plans in place for this type of... So there's so many things that actually make up a drought. So if you don't get rain or enough rain for the first 2 years, when that third year strikes and there isn't any rain, well, we do need a little help. Most farmers are notoriously self-reliant and they don't want handouts. But the trouble is, when it goes on for too long, then we do need a little help. And it doesn't necessarily need to be monetary. Maybe we could just get some bulldozers in to help clean out our dams, so the next time it does rain, we have got water. So it frustrates me that the government won't put these types of plans in place before the droughts hit, because it's an emotional time for everybody and you are not going to make good decisions in the middle of that emotional time. It's just band-aiding the problem. So that was my plea, was the fact that, you know, farmers don't want handouts, but when it's gone on longer than what we can handle, in our own situation, my husband and I keep 2 years worth of hay, and we make sure we hope we've got 2 years worth of water. So we'll handle it ourselves for that amount of time. But if it does go on longer, and you know, for people that have been facing drought for 3 or 4 years, their souls are just about being dried up as well. They need to know that people are thinking of them and there's help there for them. So that was why I wrote that, and I didn't even intend on writing. I just sat down and went blah, and it took off.
Sunday morning in the paper.
Yeah.
I wonder just the effect your books actually have on city folk and our impression of rural life, and whether or not we actually, by reading them, become more sympathetic or empathetic with those on the land in these times.
Well, I hope so. That's one of the privileged positions I've got now, that I do have the ear of the city people, and that I'm taking my life to wherever they are. So I hope that somehow I can have an impact on them, that just to give them a little taste of my life that they may not have otherwise experienced. I hope that's the case.
Fleur, thank you very much for talking with us.
Thank you for
It's
having
been
me.
wonderful. It's great to meet you.
Yeah, it's really good to meet you too, John.
Fleur's book, Crimson Dawn, is available from booktopia.com.au right now. It's a strange thing to know someone that long and never actually meet in person.
Absolutely.
It's wonderful.
Sort of feel like I want to give you a hug.